When you hear about high lead levels in drinking water, your thoughts might turn to the crisis in Flint, Michigan. We've heard a lot about that. But now, a new investigation has found drinking water in some Canadian cities actually exceeds the dangerous levels seen in Flint, and people have been consuming it without knowing. The investigation, which included journalists from the Toronto Star and the Associated Press, looked at drinking water in 11 different Canadian cities. The results show that 1/3 had lead levels that exceeded the national safety guidelines of 5 parts per billion. And some of the worst water was found in places like Montreal, Regina, and Prince Rupert, BC. The data comes from more than 12,000 water tests conducted since 2014. And for more, I want to bring in Robert Cribb. He was the lead investigative reporter with the Toronto Star, taking part in this investigation. And Robert, thank you so much for coming on the program. This was shocking to me when I read it. Why is this still an issue in Canada?
Yeah, and it's still an issue in Canada because we still have lead pipes everywhere, and we don't even seem to understand where they are. We surveyed cities across the country. We asked them the extent to which they still have a network of lead pipes. Most of them are guessing. They have estimates, but nobody seems to know. So the only way to really get a measure of this is to measure at the tap, which is what we did. We spent a year gathering tests from across the country, measuring the levels of lead coming out of taps. We sent student reporters across the country to 32 towns and cities, knocked on doors, gathered water samples, had them tested by accredited labs. And all the data came together effectively showing the same thing. Around 30 to 40% of the test results showed that there were elevated levels of lead.
And this is lead, this is water that's going into not just our homes, but schools, daycares, government facilities for that matter. So even if homeowners are changing the pipes in their homes, it doesn't necessarily mean they're safe.
No, the lead exists on both sides of the property line, right? So you could have it on your own property line for which you are entirely responsible, and it's up to you to have it replaced at a cost of in the range of $5,000, sometimes $10,000. And then there's lead still existing in city infrastructures across the country. Now, they've been working hard to get rid of that, but one or the other is going to inflate the levels of lead. And again, it is such an intransigent problem that it is incredibly expensive. It's a deep infrastructure problem. Politicians have not turned their attention to this. This has not been on the public radar at all. And so our attempt here is to try and renew a conversation about this and certainly inform, enlighten, and let politicians know that this is still important.
Robert, is part of the problem the fact that it's jurisdiction? It falls under all three, really, federal, provincial, and municipal.
Yeah, there is some overlapping there. So the federal government, uniquely, and this was surprising to me, there really is no mandated federal rules on this in terms of the government, the federal government telling municipalities or provinces how they should test, how often, and what the levels are. So they give guidelines, and so we use the federal guideline, which is 5 parts per billion. But there is a patchwork of testing systems across the country. The regimes are different from city to city, from province to province. There is nothing like what exists in the United States under the EPA. There is no federal mandated regulatory standards.
Okay, so what can people do? Is it really up to them to do their own testing? And if so, what do you do with the results? You can only, like you say, the jurisdiction falls on both sides of the property line.
Yeah, so the first thing, I'm going to tell you what I did. I came to this story. This was an idea that I brought to the table because it happened to me. I had lead in my home. I had a young daughter. There's tremendous concerns with that, and so I had it tested, and ultimately I had high levels of lead. So I had it replaced. So the first thing you should do is get your water tested by an accredited source or lab. And then you need to figure out whether it's on your side or the city side, and then you need to call the city and figure out if there's a way to do this to ensure that you're removing lead on both sides.
But again, if it's on the city side, what can you do if they're not changing the pipes yet?
Scream. Tell them they need to do it. Make a lot of noise. Talk to your neighbors. Create political pressure. The fact is that this is not a joke. The health implications from this are very serious, particularly among For children, we're talking about cognitive development issues, lowered IQ, behavioral issues. Pregnant women, the health implications range from complications in pregnancy to stillbirths, and even for us adults, it's renal issues, hypertension. I mean, this is no joke, and so it requires real action. And I'll tell you that one of the grievances of water officials across the country is that, they say we make this public and we urge people to take advantage of subsidies and loans to get their pipes removed, and there's very little uptake. And so part of the responsibility here is very much you and I and everyone who owns a house with lead pipes. We really do have to engage in this and understand the risks and take action on it.
Well, we appreciate you coming on the program today and walking us through this. Robert Cribb is an investigative journalist with the Toronto Star, leading this investigation into lead in our drinking water. Thank you again.
Yeah, thanks very much.